Of course the neighbors would start doing their yard.
Well, it's all good. Hey, good morning,
Good
y'all.
morning.
We're
We're not going to be anxious about it, are we?
No, I don't think so. Dude's been weed eating his lawn for a little while, but I think it's about over. I really do.
Yay. I'm trying to see if our live stream is going. It looks like somebody joined us, so they must have found us.
That's a good sign.
It is a good sign. Give us a quick shout out. Let us know where you're listening from. Always fun to be able to see all the places that this message of encouragement is going forward to.
Yeah, especially if you're listening to it on the recording. You know, it's always nice to hear from some of our
Hey,
good
good morning,
friends
Melinda, Tim, all of you guys. Yay.
But on the recorded version, okay, I got to get louder. The dude behind me, I'm telling you, he's going to stop any second. He really is. Go get my gun.
No, you can't
Just
do
kidding.
that. Oh my goodness.
Just
All right. Good
kidding.
morning from Arkansas. Milka.
Step
good.
one to exchange anxiety for peace. Don't take yourself so serious.
Yeah. That's
Don't
awesome.
take anybody so serious.
That's awesome. You know, actually, it's interesting. We started looking at some statistics, and did you know 1 out of 13 people struggle with anxiety?
I'd say a bare minimum of 1 out of 13 people actually struggle with anxiety. And in fact, I'd take it a step further. I think we all struggle with it at different times, depending on what our circumstances are. You know, hey, good morning, North Carolina. What's up?
Georgia, Carolina, North Carolina. That's awesome.
Yeah, Kennesaw, Georgia. I've been through there many times. Hey, we appreciate y'all jumping in. We were just talking about, you know, the fact that 1 in 13 people statistically, and I think I honestly believe that's a very low conservative figure. 1 in 13 people deal with anxiety, struggle with anxiety, I think probably on a regular basis. But then in addition to that, I think that the reality is that every one of us struggle with it on some level. Depending on what season
Sure.
you're in your life or what's going on in your day. And you know, we've dealt with a lot of anxiety and fears and such over the years, right?
Yep. You know, I think one of the best practices that we learned in different seasons, you know, and I think, again, as you said, Greg, there's just different seasons of life that sometimes the obstacles that are coming against us, like our neighbor weed eating back here, it can set us off course from what we planned.
Yeah.
Or our initial thoughts. And so that happens all throughout different seasons of life. And one of the things that we've learned to do is simply in those moments is to stop and to take inventory. So for me, the way that plays out is I take inventory of what is it that I'm thinking about. And usually I'm thinking about a lot of stupid what ifs. Well, what if this happens? Or what if this doesn't go? Or what if and I'm trying to control my circumstances, but if I can stop what's going on up here, take inventory, then I have the power to switch that thinking.
Yeah.
Right? To change from feeding the wrong thoughts and to begin to feed the right thoughts, to begin to say, okay, who is it that's really in control? What do I know? And some of the other things that we've shared on previous versions of broadcasts. But where is God in all of this? And I begin to shift my mind to who He is, to what He's promised, and then I can hold fast to those promises. Your inventory kind of looks a little different though, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's important to know yourself.
Yep.
I really think it's important to know yourself and to kind of observe your own behaviors. And so for me, I know that the first place I go if I begin to feel an overwhelming sense of fear or just anxiety in general is I do inventory and I ask myself, you know, how's my rest been? Because I'm just telling you right now, if I'm tired, if I am not resting well at night, or when we've been on the road, and you know, there's certain seasons where
we're traveling every week.
Yeah, we get the great privilege of traveling all over the country, and we're in different time zones, you know. And well, when we come back home, even when we get back home, it takes a little while to get readjusted again from all those different time zones and such. And so I might not sleep well. And I'm just telling you, if I'm dealing with fear and anxiety and I haven't been resting well, I know that whatever it is that I am pondering that's got me stewing and it's got me stirred up is feeling a lot bigger than what it actually is. And so I think that the way that empowers me in those moments, love, is if I'm feeling fear and anxiety, and I know that I'm not rested,
Yep.
right? Then I know that I can say to myself, self, this isn't as big as it feels like it is.
Yep.
Get a good night's rest and
Yep.
come back to this tomorrow. And then I actually do the same inventory that you talked about, and I start trying to feed my thoughts with something more positive, and just change and
Yeah.
shift the direction of what it is that I'm thinking about. And I've talked with a lot of other people that say that just those two simple steps help them a lot with overcoming fear and anxiety. But I think that there's more, and there's even more very, very practical steps as we get started here this morning, that people can relate to if they're struggling with fear and anxiety, to help them work through that and kind of make that exchange for
That's
for
so
more
good.
peace in their home and their marriage and in their life in general.
Yeah. So, what is it that you're thinking about today? What are you meditating on? Take inventory of that. If you feel like you're a little restless in your spirit, man, maybe you just need a good night's rest. Need to take some time, have a good meal, right? There are some times where I am so busy that I'm forgetting to eat, and that can throw me off kilter as well. So taking inventory, not just of your thoughts, but of the activities that are surrounding your life, and how can you slow the pace so that you can get something that's more sustainable.
Yeah, I wanna throw something out here that I think all of us need to be reminded of, and just to hear, and that's that. You know, sometimes I think we just take ourselves so seriously. I mentioned it just a little bit earlier today.
Right.
But honestly, I catch myself, and I've gotten better over the years, but I've caught myself at different times just taking myself too seriously, and getting wound up, and taking everything that I'm doing too seriously.
Yeah.
And you know what? Life's too doggone short. It is just way too short for us to sweat the small stuff. We were talking with a couple here recently, and they were talking about an instance where they were wanting to go paddleboarding. They were wanting to go out and have some fun, and then some other people wanted to join them. And the husband in this particular case got all wound up about
Yep.
it, you know, and he's like, I just wanted it to be us, you know. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think we just got to roll with the flow, you know. And again, life's too short to be stressing out about things like this. We should just kind of learn to literally chill out and enjoy life just a little bit. So we've touched on some real practical things. Give me a couple of more that you were thinking about as we discuss some things that help us deal with fear and anxiety, love.
Yeah, sometimes it is changing up the pace, though. It's changing the scenery. If you find yourself in a place where you're having anxious thoughts, maybe it's time to do something different. So maybe watch a movie together, get your mind off of some things, worship, read together, take a walk. I know through this season, one of the things and the saving grace for a lot of people is just to grab one another's hands and get outdoors and take a stroll, right? To change up the monotony of the day, to get away from, and sometimes it's just a good night of rest. Sometimes it's getting to a different space or place so that you're not in that environment that may be causing a little bit of the anxiety.
Yeah. I think, you know, I'm thinking about this as we're talking here. I'm thinking specifically about how this affects our marriage when it begins to enter in, love.
Okay.
You know, when either one of us, excuse me, or both of us are dealing with fear and anxiety. Listen, sometimes it's warranted, you know. In other
Right.
words, sometimes there's some things that are happening that kind of shake us up. And so, excuse me, got a frog in my throat and a gnat that's flying around my face. I don't know what's going on here.
We should have been inside.
I'm under
getting
attack.
anxious, yeah.
But as I'm processing that, I think that that there's another practical thing sometimes that we forget about, and that is really turning our mind to gratitude and thanksgiving,
So good.
and speaking life over one another. You know, look, this is the one place in life where if Julie should have permission to be imperfect, to be wound up and uptight. If there's one place on this planet that this woman should have permission to be wrong, you know, it should be within the four walls of our home. It should be when she's with me. And I think so often in our relationship, and I've made this mistake, like I've turned on her. And when she was having an off day, maybe I would be like, you know, what's your freaking problem, chick? You know what I mean? Like, why don't you chill out, you know? Or why are you getting all up in my stuff, you know?
That
You
helped.
need to back off, right?
I've done
you're-
that to you too.
We've both done it. But that's really not the answer, is it? I mean, what do you want when you're feeling anxious? When you're uptight and wound up? You probably want someone to be soft with you.
Right.
You know, you probably want someone who will approach you and say, "Hey, babe, are you okay? Is there something I can do to serve you? Is there some way I can help you? Is there, you know, I mean, you just have to kind of know your mate well enough to be able to look at them and figure out how you can communicate grace to them so that they have permission just to be a little bit off sometimes, and love them back to peace
Yeah.
in the relationship and in their day.
It's
right?
good. Yeah, I think that that's actually a great best practice too. Is if you are the spouse of somebody who is struggling with anxiety, don't automatically go to a fix-it mode.
Yeah, don't kick them while they're down, for crying out loud.
Yeah, just be present and
Yeah.
loving and encouraging. It's a gentle touch. It's a gentle reminder. Like, I'm here for you. How can I help? What do you need from me right now? How can I help you shift from this place? One of the things that we've done over the years for seasons, especially like this, is as we're navigating it, sometimes it's tougher, but when we get outside of that place, we have a conversation about what took place.
Yeah.
And we start having agreed upon checkpoints
Yep.
to come to say, okay, when this happens, and more than likely there's going to come a season again where fear creeps in, if you're human at all.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
if you know how you're going to respond in that moment, one of my favorite checkpoints is Greg will even say, we don't have time for weak-mindedness. Now, the reason why that's okay in our relationship is because we've agreed upon it, that it'll work.
That's a good point. Yeah.
We've already established
That's so good.
we don't have time for weak-mindedness, and we're both bought into that. So the moment that we say those words,
It's kind of a mantra. It's kind of a call up to either one of us, and we
That's
know
it.
that. We talked the other day about sometimes when we're on the road, you know, we're professional speakers, right? And so you would be amazed at how many times we have to take the stage and speak all weekend long, and we run in a fever, feel like
Yeah.
crap, you know. And so again, it's a similar checkpoint to that. When that happens, or we're exhausted, we didn't sleep the night before, whatever may happen, then we look at each other and we're like, you know, this is what we do. We're professionals. This is what we do. So, you know, what we're saying is we're not saying necessarily that you need to do those exact things, but what Julie's suggesting here for us is that what works for us is to, after the fact, when you've gone through some seasons of anxiety or a day of anxiety and fear and such, maybe have a conversation and establish what works. Sometimes I'll ask Julie, honey, when you're off, or if you're struggling and you're having anxiety, or when you're really wound up, you know, or whatever, help me understand. Let's think through what we can do to help one another during those time periods. And if it's not in the heat of the moment, then we're able to really establish some good ground rules. And again, one of ours is we're professionals. This is what we do. And that just automatically causes us to be able to pull through just about anything, right?
yep,
And then on a practical day-to-day, it is, hey, you know what? We don't have time for weak-mindedness right now. So this is not a time to crumble. This is not a time to succumb to fear. This is a time to charge forward. This is a time to make stuff happen. We don't have time for weak-mindedness. And you know what? It totally, totally works for us, doesn't it?
yeah. It's slowing the pace,
Yeah,
slow down,
intentionally.
breathe in, and hold fast to the thought patterns, the physical patterns, and then the word patterns that you're aligning your thoughts up with, of stopping and beginning to declare what the truth is. And if you're in the heat of a battle, Greg said that's not the time to sight the weapon, right? It's you sight the weapon prior to the battle so you know that you're ready and you're prepared. So when anxiety comes, one of the best practices that we're saying is outside of that, already know how you're going to respond. Write out those simple declarative truths of what you know to be true, what you believe to be true,
Yep.
and then begin to profess them out loud. We talked about my gold glittery book. When I get in seasons of fear, I come back to what I have established that I know to be true,
Yeah.
and I remind my mind of those truths. We speak those minds out loud to one another. So one of the best practices you can do is write down some declarative truths that you know and then speak them out loud.
Absolutely. You know, you said something a minute ago that spurred a thought. I had a conversation with my staff yesterday, and one of the things that I told our leader and the entire staff actually is sometimes we have to slow down in order to speed up.
Oh, so good.
Here's what that means to me and what it is I was trying to get across to my team. Sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. What that means is that if we're not careful, particularly in times when we're under stress and we're dealing with fear and anxiety, we can just get in this mode of going from one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, and we're just constantly in reactionary mode. That's exactly right. We're just reacting to everything that's happening around us rather than being very causative and becoming the peace that's in all of the reactive stuff that's going on around us. So I think that one of the things that helps my team and that helps me is to remember to slow down in order to speed up. So I stop and I pause and I begin to think, okay, what is the desired outcome? You hear us talk about this a lot, right? What is the desired outcome? What is it that's going to move the ball further down the court right now? And I sometimes will instruct my staff, even my family. I'm like, listen, I'm off limits unless you're on fire and you need me to toss a cup of water on you and put you out.
Yep.
Then don't bother me for the next hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is that I need to do in order to get some peace of mind and stop and think and then plan forward. So slow down in order to speed up means that we stop the world from spinning long enough in order to get some clarity and some direction on what it is that we need to do to move the ball further down the court, and then actually jot down what our priorities are, and then methodically go about those things so that we can begin to move forward. When I'm under fear and anxiety and I'm just in reactionary mode, man, I don't have clear thoughts. And you know, it's actually scientific, love. When we're dealing with fear and anxiety, there's two little glands that sit on top of your kidneys. They're called adrenal glands. And what happens is those adrenal glands begin to pump out adrenaline into your body. And when you're dealing with fear and anxiety or anger or whatever, and that adrenaline begins to kick through your body, what happens is it triggers very naturally a fight or flight response in our body physically. Why does this matter? Because all of the blood drains from your brain and into your exteriors. You're not thinking clearly, which is exactly why we need to slow down so that we can speed up. We've got to get that adrenaline to dial down a little bit so that we can get clarity and the blood returns literally, physically back into our brain so that we can think clearly and begin to formulate a plot to take over the world.
Well, and that brings us to the final thought.
Whatever your world might be.
And the final thought is to remember your future. You know, it sounds strange, but here's something that's so beautiful out of Ecclesiastes 3. It talks about that God seeks that which passes by. And so get this in your mind. God's already seen your future. He's already seen the promises that he's whispered to you. Sometimes fear and anxiety takes place because we're so wrapped up in the here and the now. But when we can shift our mind to an eternal perspective and focus on our future and the desired outcomes and the promises and the visions that God has whispered to us, those promises, what happens is we change the what if scenarios that are negative to the what if scenarios that are positive, because what if God really is true to his word? What if there really is a future vision that awaits us? What if there is a promised land and we start envisioning those things and we shift to the very thing that God's promised us? We change the scenario in our head and we believe for the future. We believe in the one who promised us that future. And what happens is when we begin to think from an eternal perspective, the here and now really just isn't all that bad. And we may find in that the reprieve that we need to slow down so that we can focus on what the next step is. What would you add to that?
The only thing that I would just reiterate one more time for all of you all that have been so faithful and stuck through this whole thing. I told you the guy would eventually stop. I didn't say when. It's the end of the broadcast. It's all good, but he finally stopped. All my fear and anxiety is gone now.
I know, it's like peaceful. See? Remember your future.
No, listen. But the answer to your question is again, I want to reiterate, it's something we talk about a lot, but maybe you're just popping in today and you've not heard us talk about it before, and that is truly, the scripture tells us that to put on the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. And anxiety and fear is, there's no question, that's a spirit of heaviness. And gratitude and thanksgiving, it's not necessarily putting on praise music and singing praise music or anything like that. I mean, if that works for you, it does for me, but that's one of a few things that we do to defeat it. But light and darkness, we've said this before, but light and darkness cannot coexist at the same time. Light dispels darkness, or darkness dispels light. And so when we're dealing with fear and anxiety in our marriage, in our life, in our business, in our finances, in our parenting, and whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Then that's darkness that's setting in and dispelling the light. The way we flip the light on truly is by thinking thoughts of gratitude. And I really have to grab a hold of my mind sometimes, love, in order to do this. But once I get in a rhythm of doing it, then I'm telling you, the fear and the anxiety, when you begin to speak the truth of who God is and the promises of his word, when you remember whose you are and who you are in his sight and what does he have to say about your situation, that praise, that gratitude, that thanksgiving. Sometimes we thank God for material things. We just stay in a thought of gratitude and thanksgiving. Sometimes when I'm thinking negatively and getting all fussy with you even, I will intentionally stop and I'm like, this is not of God. I mean, sometimes you just got to put things in a black and white scenario, folks. And when I'm ragging on her, if you will, it's not of God for me to do so. And so what is of God? It's to speak life. It's to speak praise over her. And I literally have caught myself and wrenched my brain as hard as it is in some moments and said, what do I love about this woman? There's no place for this craziness, and I'm not the guy who's determined here in life to make her, fix her, make her better, and and all this stuff. If I am, then the way to do that is to pull her up and to love on her. And I begin to think about the attributes that I want to praise in her, and it changes things instantaneously, and we begin to find our rhythm again without the fear and anxiety.
So today we want to encourage you, take some time to practice some gratitude. Slow down your thinking, think about what you're thinking about, and feed the right thoughts. Begin to express praise. And if you are in this season, I would also challenge you to, when you can break free and define what it is that you really do believe, write down those declarative thoughts, promises, truths, the future, the what ifs of what if God really is going to follow up and follow through, all of those kinds of things, so that you have weaponry to overcome the anxiety quicker the next go around.
Yeah, when you're writing down your future, what she's talking about is writing the future that you desire. Pondering those things. What do you want? When we're struggling with fear and anxiety, we're thinking about all the things we don't want, right? And so again, flipping that on its ear and saying, okay, what do we want? It's kind of like going back to one of the lessons we taught earlier about focus on what you do know rather than what you don't know. So listen, I think we're probably pretty well. You tried to close us out a couple of times, and then I went all crazy on you and came with a couple.
Hey,
more
have
points,
a great weekend. Let us know how we can pray for you. And if you're struggling with anxiety, you can, and you don't want to post what that is, you can always PM us. We do always come back and pray over those things.
Yes, we
God
do.
bless you. Have a
Have
great
a great
weekend.
day. And a great weekend, yeah.